So Governor Inslee and AG Ferguson met with the Attorney General Holder in D.C. several weeks ago. I think the concerns that we heard coming back, and the governor's continuing to work with the federal government and the Department of Justice on this, is their concern is diversion or spillage or leakage out of the state of Washington. So when we talk about a strictly regulated marketplace, I think that's what the federal government wants to know, that the state is going to track it from seed to sale, will know where it is. Of course, you can only grow in Washington and you can only sell in Washington. So I think one of the concerns that the federal government has is making sure it's strictly regulated, making sure that just enough is being produced for what the legal consumption is in Washington. One of the concerns that we've heard at the public forums, there's a 1,000-foot restriction in the new law for where producers, processors, and retailers of cannabis can be located. And it's pretty restrictive in that it goes beyond even our liquor laws, which is a 500-foot restriction for churches and schools. This includes arcades, it includes parks, it includes transit centers, and of course, schools. And recently the city of Seattle showed us a map of the city of Seattle using that 1,000-foot buffer, and there weren't a lot of places where these businesses would be able to locate. That's of concern because obviously if you're creating a legal market here, it needs to be available to the public or reasonably available. So we've heard some concerns with respect to that. To be honest with you, some of the local governments like that restriction because it means that they won't be everywhere. The problem is they need to be available, and it's modeled after, again, when the state was selling liquor, the OFM estimate or the fiscal note estimate was that there would be 362 retail locations statewide, similar to what we had for alcohol. And so there is some concern, I think maybe from the board who's got to implement this new law, that we need to be able to place those in locations that are convenient to the public. What we're seeing is the vast majority of people at the forums are people that are engaged in the industry now. They're interested in knowing how can I get a producer license, can I get a processor license, can I get a retail license? And I think you talked about the illicit market, and I think that's something that we'll wrestle with in the next few months, which is if you're really going to minimize that market, it's probably most likely what you want to do is move it over into the legal market and provide them with licenses. Given the overwhelming number of people at all of these forums, I'm just not sure we're going to issue as many licenses as the people that are showing up at the forums. So I think there's a lot of people engaged in that marketplace, and I think the medical marijuana industry also, we're seeing a lot of them coming to the hearings because they're interested in, of course, getting legal licenses today. So if you look at the new law, one thing to keep in mind is that the board is required to implement rules by December 1st. We're not required to have growers, processors, or retailers selling before that time. But in order to look at that December 1st deadline, what we've done is we've backed up from that. And if you see in our implementation timeline, we're looking at grower licenses being available in August. Obviously, they're going to need 3 or 4 months in order to grow the cannabis for the processor and the retailer to be able to sell it. So we're looking at the first of the year, December or January of 2014, as the date that the retail outlets will open. We're involving the cities, and that's one of the reasons that we went out to meet across the state, was to get input directly from cities about concerns that they have. And I think we're hearing concerns around enforcement, what additional resources have been given to the cities through this initiative that can provide them with assurances that they'll be able to do what they need to do at their level. And so also concerns about where these locations will be, how many there will be, and that's a determination we'll make as we move through the rulemaking process. But remember, if you look at the fiscal impact statement for the initiative, they assume numbers with respect to growers, processors, and retailers. And again, it's modeled after our alcohol beverage law. One of the things that we're looking at to keep in mind is we're looking at a strictly regulated and controlled cannabis market, similar to what we have for alcohol today. So we'll be looking at grading, testing, packaging, labeling this product just like you would any other commodity. So with respect to the labeling, you're going to know how strong, for example, or the level of THC in the ingredient, whether it's a food product or just the cannabis itself. So once we begin collecting revenue, there is the fiscal impact statement that was made by the Office of Financial Management. The Governor's Budget Office allocates $5 million a year to the Liquor Control Board. We suspect that, or we expect that a lot of those funds will be for enforcement. And again, like our liquor enforcement officers who do compliance around wineries and breweries, the producers, the distributors, and then retailers, we will have additional resources at the Liquor Control Board for enforcement of those that we license. So we will not be pricing the product. Now, you know that there are large taxes that have been placed at all three levels, both the producer at 25%, the processor at 25%, and the retailer at 25%. But the state will not, as it did for liquor a couple of years ago, set the price of cannabis. Now, there is a concern, given the prices with respect to the taxes involved, that it has to be sold at a price point that obviously is at the same or below the illicit market. So I think that's a challenge that we're going to have to deal with as we move that market in, but I can't tell you that I know the answer to that. But obviously you're going to have to, the only way to destroy the illicit market or to minimize it is to make sure that the cost of cannabis is similar or lower than what it is in the black market. AWC has a fact sheet that you've done that shows the distribution of funds from revenue that's collected from these taxes, and I don't see a specific dedication to local jurisdictions out of that. You see, I think 19.6% to the state general fund. Obviously the state could choose to use part of the general fund to fund local governments, but it's a concern as we've been out in the public forums with respect to cities concerned about the impact of this new market on the community and the fact that there may be funds that aren't available with respect to the revenue going directly to cities and counties. We know in the liquor distribution, for example, cities, counties, and the general fund share a percentage of profits and revenue from the sale of alcohol. That doesn't appear to be present in I-502. We've got a group of other agencies that are involved in implementing the new law. Department of Agriculture will be consulting with the board. Department of Financial Institutions is a state agency that deals directly with federal banks, but that's a concern and that's a challenge. We've heard that from folks who have come to the forums that, one, I need to be able to acquire capital. Two, I need to be able to open an account at a bank. Of course, they're all federally insured that we're aware of. So that's a challenge that the liquor board isn't going to have to deal with, because obviously we don't have any say with respect to that. But it will be a challenge if the market that we open is a cash-only market and there's concerns there. So we're working with the Governor's Office, the Attorney General, and with the Department of Financial Institutions to find out if there have been suggestions of a state chartered bank that would not be required to be federally insured. We're having others look into that because that's really not our purview, but it is a concern. We are concerned that banks won't be available for those who hold the producer, the processor, or the retail licenses, because of course they're federally insured, and of course controlled substance is still illegal according to federal law.